2026 live stream, bringing you the latest from the biggest tech event of the year. Today, LA Times Studios and Monks are back at the Foundry, continuing conversations with industry innovators, while our floor team checks out what vendors are showcasing. We'll be popping in throughout the day, bringing you live looks of the event, so sit back and enjoy. Let's go to our host, Faith Pinno, with her first interview of Day 2, happening at the CES Foundry.
Hi, I'm Faith Pinno at CES 2026 at the Foundry in Las Vegas. I'm joined now by Ryan McConville. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ryan, you are the Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer at NBC Universal. Fabulous to have you with us. Last month, y'all rolled out a very new ad tool, and it combines something that's been dominating the conversation this year at CES, which is AI. Can you explain to me how that technology is now being implemented for companies and brands looking to advertise?
Yes, of course. So thanks again for having me. I mean, the application of AI, as we'll probably talk about throughout this interview, is sort of interspersed through a lot of aspects of advertising. But in this particular use case, it's really about the sort of old-time question of how do I serve the right ad to the right person at the right time? And NBC has been making a lot of investments over, call it the last 5 years, in two of those categories. The right ad. I think we'll talk a little bit about that today. New ad formats, like what are the ad formats that when you show them, and these are the formats you actually see, really resonate with consumers and get them to take action. So that's the right ad. The right person is really based on more advanced audience targeting. So as television has moved from, call it traditional linear television, where everyone saw the same ad at the same time, regardless of who you are or where you lived, to a streaming environment where you can choose which ad to serve to which person. The targeting of the ad to the right person has gotten better and better. So those two things have been improving. The right time now is, what is the exact right moment to show this person the perfect ad? And AI is unlocking a whole new potential there. And the way that it works is essentially, we're able to scan our entire video library. Think about all the shows or movies that NBC Universal has ever created, put it through a large language model, and ask it for very specific moments that are relevant to an advertiser. So let's just say that there's a candy brand that wants to do something around holiday moments, right? So we can look for things as specific as every movie that features a holiday kiss, or every movie where there is a family scene around a Christmas tree. And the first ad break after that moment, we can insert their holiday candy ad. And we can do that across thousands of assets at scale. So we can not only show a great ad format to the right person, but we can do it at that exact right time. And what we've seen in early studies is that the performance of those ads, by aligning that contextually to those moments, it outperforms standard run of media by large percentages. So better recall of the ad, better action taken on the ad, more site visitations. Basically across the funnel, you're seeing those ads perform better.
That's fascinating. So you really touched on getting people at the right time. Let's think about how NBCU is reaching people on the right platforms. I know a lot of talk is also about cross-platform optimization. So can you break that down a little bit for me?
I'm so glad you mentioned it, because I think when you talk to, I guess, the industry, there's obviously a lot of the hype is around streaming, right? Because that's the new thing. But very few people realize that 80% of video impressions that still exist in the market today are viewed on traditional linear televisions, right? So NBCU is a major investor in live sports. We have something called Legendary February that's happening coming up, where we're going to reach 2 out of 3 Americans for 17 days straight in a row. It's the Olympics, it's the Super Bowl, it's the NBA All-Star Game, all within 17 days. So if you need to reach anyone at that point, NBC has them, right? Kind of captive watching one of those live event moments. But they're not just watching on streaming, even though everyone's talking about streaming. They're watching on traditional broadcast television channels. So we have built a lot of technology that allows advertisers to do advanced targeting and measurement that captures those audiences in both environments. Specifically, we have a new product called Total Impact Live, where we're able to understand who saw your ad and call it the Olympics, both on the linear side, the traditional linear side, and on Peacock, the streaming side. We're able to pull the ad exposures of who saw those ads, and then we're able to retarget them later on across our video library. And you might ask, well, what is the benefit of doing that? Well, you're taking these huge brand moments that happen in live events, which is creating awareness for your message as an advertiser, and then you're following up on that later on in other environments when you're just watching your show, whenever you want to watch it, choosing your own adventure. We call it VOD, video on demand, right? With sequential messaging, which is reminding them that they saw that ad during the Olympics, for example, and like, here's a subsequent message. When you do that, when you increase the frequency and you add to the storytelling, similar to the contextual AI piece I talked about, we see better performance. We see people visiting the sites more. We see people remembering the ads more. In fact, in early beta tests that we did of this product, we saw 7x more website visits for folks that had seen the initial ad in a live environment, live sporting environment, and then been re-exposed to that ad later on. So that's sort of the new product, Total Impact Live. It's using these live moments and then refining those people later on and kind of pushing them through the purchase funnel.
That's very interesting, and you're doing that all after the fact, but I also know that you all have a new thing called the Performance Insights Hub. So that allows, from my understanding, brands to see how their advertisements are landing in real time. Explain that to me a little, and what advantage does that have for advertisers?
So if you've been in, so great question, and we have names for all of these things, so they're hard to keep track of, but you're doing great job. Performance Insights Hub is another product that we announced at CES. If you've been in the TV business for a long time, TV measurement was mostly you probably heard of the gross rating point, right? So what does that really mean? It meant that after the show aired, and usually it would be some time after your advertising aired in that show, you would get gross ratings points, which would tell you how many people within a certain demographic band, call it 18 to 49-year-olds, saw the ad. So you're getting, I mean, that's something, right?
That's a very target age group.
Yeah,
correct?
Well, it's a broad demo. Mm-hmm. So you're like, if you're selling dog food to make, for example, it's like how many people that own pets saw the ad? Doesn't answer that question. It also, you get the information after your campaign's over, which is another important point. So it's sort of, how I describe it is it's sort of just top of the funnel. It just shows you the broad audience that saw it, and it tells you after the campaign ended. Compare that to some of the technology tools that exist in the big tech platforms, the social platforms. They're all two things that traditional TV wasn't. They're real time. So you don't have to wait till your campaign's over to see how it's performing. You're seeing how it's performing the second it goes live, and you're seeing what's happening. And you're not just seeing the top of the funnel, you're seeing the middle and bottom of the funnel. So what do I mean by that? You're seeing, based on the people that saw the ads, how many people went and did a search on the web. How many people visited my website? How many people downloaded my app? How many people went into my store? We have set up television measurement to capture now all of those aspects. So not just how many 18 to 49-year-olds did I see, but what did they do? What action did they take? And then we're capturing that data in real time and making it available during the campaign. And the benefit of that is, when you know how the campaign's performing while it's still live, you can optimize it, right? So you don't have to wait till it's over and be like, you know what? I wish I had done this or that, had I known that, right? So now we're giving that information to advertisers in real time so they can pivot the campaign, they can apply retargeting, they can change the messaging, they can tweak and optimize to make it more performant while it's still running.
That's really interesting. And tell me a little bit, so many people, they watch streaming and they're like, ads. Mm-hmm. Tell me about arrival ads, and tell me about how that could impact the viewer's experience, but also what it does for advertisers. Kind of give me both sides of that, if you will.
Okay, so some people might say that, but I would also say that streaming has done, and in particular Peacock has done a really good job of improving the ad experience. One of the things traditional TV, I think, did over time was it increased the ad load, so there's like more and more and more and more ads. Peacock has the lightest ad load, which what that means is like the fewest amount of ads per show. So we show very few ads relative to traditional television, and people then appreciate them more, and they stand out more, and people remember them more. And then when you add in these things like the contextual kind of targeting, what we're seeing is that people like the ads a lot more than traditional advertising.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah, quality over quantity,
sure.
exactly. But to your question about arrival ads is one of the new ad innovations that we've introduced that is only available in streaming. So what is a streaming experience that is not kind of the same in traditional linear television? One is when you log onto a streaming app, Peacock, you're greeted with your profile page, and I don't know if you have little kids or not, but
I do not have children, but I do have a Peacock account, and I'm familiar with the profile page.
I have two little kids, so I have like a little Peacock for Ryan, I have a little Peacock for Amy, my wife, and I have a little Peacock icon for my kids, right? So you're greeted with like which profile is watching, because then it customizes the content selection, right? So this is the screen, the arrival screen that everyone is greeted with when they enter a streaming app. And it's a great moment when you're kind of selecting to promote both our own shows. So like if I'm choosing the Ryan profile, I might promote a show that is going to be relevant to me. Peacock is introducing for the very first time of all streamers a rotation for also advertisers to be in that screen. So as you're choosing your profile, there's a very elegant sort of video experience that comes on that introduces a relevant ad based on that profile type to that person as they arrive. And the great thing about that is it takes advantage of the full audience. Every day they're coming in, right, to the app. It's almost like just like homepage advertising, if you think about like how websites used to describe it.
Sure, that makes total sense. That makes sense about the name as well. Arrival ads, arrival page. I didn't think about that before. Our last question is going to be a little bit of a rapid fire question.
Okay.
If a CES marketer is leaving the conference today, the last day of the conference, what should they know about where the direction of TV and streaming and live events is headed in 2026?
So I think, I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of fascinating things going on in television. I think a lot of it is probably around automation. I'll have to use the word AI again, even though I don't know if people are getting sick of hearing it or not. But let me explain why it's important. I think for a long time, television ads there were only certain advertisers that could participate in the television market. There was this big ceremony called the Upfront, which we absolutely still have, but you kind of had to know like a sales representative at a big media company and have like a massive budget and like do an upfront deal, and like, you know, so the Fortune 500 brands were like the big TV spenders. Through agentic AI and through automation and digitization, we are now democratizing access to premium television for smaller advertisers. When you talk to like the big tech platforms, the social platforms, they have millions of advertisers, from, you know, the big Fortune 500s to like these small mom and pop shops. Television has struggled with the ability to bring in that larger market, that longer tail of smaller advertisers, because they may just be able to be like, listen, I got a credit card and access to the web, can I buy TV ads? And the answer used to be no. The answer today is very much yes. So for example, this coming February for the Olympics, for the first time, we're making NBCU Comcast Universal Ads Manager available to buy ads in the Olympics. So what does that mean? That means if you're a small business out there, you can take a credit card, log on to Universal Ads, open an account, and buy ads on the Olympics. And anyone can do that. And so the application of automation and AI to make the buying process easier is inviting in a whole new generation of marketers that can now benefit from being around these amazing cultural moments, whether they're live moments or original series moments in Peacock. And that's really exciting, I think, for us to welcome a whole new slate of advertisers, and also for them to be in a platform that has been harder to access historically.
Wow. Well, Ryan, lots to look forward to, especially legendary February. As a sports fan, I'm excited.
Awesome.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining me. Once again, Ryan McConville, Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer at NBC Universal. For more CES 2026 coverage, make sure to head over to latimes.com or visit our YouTube at LA Times Studios.
Along with interviews from the Foundry, our team is also on the field getting a peek at all of the latest tech and gadgets. Kim Horcher will be showing us what she found on the show floor, and we'll have more updates all day long. Now let's see what Kim's got for us.
I got to test out the Afila One, which they say is going to be out end of this year, with pre-orders coming in before then. But there's a lot to this car that you can't tell from the outside. Of course, there are displays on the outside that can be customized and changed, and even your license plate can be digital. But the inside is where this shines. I'm going to be honest, the range is pretty modest in terms of an electric vehicle, but where this really shines is the Sony integration, where we have PlayStation 5 remote play. There are various sound and video and audio experiences together that you can combine into the panoramic display, which was very cool. It seems to be designed to not distract the driver, fortunately, where you can swipe things over or even have zonal audio if the passenger and backseat passengers want to play, let's say, a PlayStation game. And it seems to be that the focus is absolutely on comfort over other, let's say, more technological functions in the car itself. But more, we're looking at the interior of the car as where we're focusing. And they did say that they're focusing on a smaller production and individual customer satisfaction. My overall impression is that this is a very enjoyable and comfortable experience for the passengers on the inside. It's good for the driver as well. There's a lot of fun additions in there in different customizations and choices that you can make. But overall, I would say this is great for families. We haven't seen a lot in terms of EV innovations this year at CES, but I think what we are seeing here is Sony focusing on what Sony does best, and that is audio, that is screens, and that is gameplay and customization. And I think the outside of the vehicle really doesn't belie how interesting, fun, and comfortable it is inside the vehicle, especially for the passengers. I would highly recommend this if you have a family of 4. Everyone could be comfortable, including the driver to a lesser extent. But it seems to be something that you can ultimately make your own and make quirky your own way and express yourself. I did walk into this thinking, big deal, but after experiencing it, it was very nice.
From hands-on demos to big ideas, CES is happening on every level. Back at the Foundry, our next conversation takes a closer look at how these technologies are being built and where they're headed next.
Hi, I'm Faith Pinot at CES 2026 at the Foundry in Las Vegas. I'm joined now by China Widener. China, welcome.
Thank you, Faith.
China, you are the U.S. Board of Directors at Deloitte, and you're also the Vice Chair of Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Industry at Deloitte. So you do a lot, and you're very well versed in what we're going to be talking about today, which I want to begin with a conversation that's been dominating CES 2026, AI. Just 12 months ago, leaders at this very conference were touting AI as this silver bullet of sorts. Now, I'm wondering, was that the case for the majority of businesses in 2025, or did that expectation fall short?
Absolutely not. Look, we have a tech trend study that really focuses on the evolution of technology and how it's being adopted, right, for organizations. And the simple truth is, while 38% of organizations experimented with AI, only 11% were really able to bring something to true full operational efficiency. So no, it wasn't. And the reality is that the perception that it would be the panacea, it would be the silver bullet, isn't necessarily different from the release of any technology. There's an arc and a maturity that all technology goes through, and that sort of first year hype of it's going to be magic and it's going to be like sprinkles of fairy dust. It always happens. And then there's the reality that sets in, and that's what we're really going to see here in 2026. It's the move from it solves all problems easily and magically to the true operationalization of AI and what that requires for organizations and businesses to do to truly reap the value.
So what does that require for businesses in 2026 who do maybe want to get into implementing more AI in their everyday workflow, but maybe have been intimidated last year?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that really matter, and I will start by telling you the most important of them is actually the least sexy of them, right? And so it's this. The reality is this particular technology, because of its ubiquity in all our lives and in all the ways in which a process happens and the way you make decisions, requires you to have a real strategic view. And so you have to take a step back. We know from our survey that the reality is right now, upwards of almost 80% of organizations are in the early stages of that strategy development, either early on or haven't started yet. But the reality is you have to take a step back and understand what is your strategic direction and what does that then look like? Because the reason why this matters is because the value in AI is in its scalability. It's not in I fixed a singular use case issue that made it more efficient. So let me give you a really concrete example anybody could understand.
Please.
I am a framer building houses. I have a hammer and I am nailing in nails to build the frame. You handed me a powered nail driver, so now I can power through 4 times as many nails in the same amount of time. But you didn't change the underlying question of, do you need nails? Should the house be framed of wood? AI allows you to say, do we need nails? Should the house be framed of wood at all? That fundamental change requires a strategic view. That's why it matters. And I say it's the least sexy because the reality is we all gravitate to the technology itself, right? It's fascinating. But the plan for the technology is actually incredibly important. And it's the thing that CEOs and boards are concerned about, which is what is that broad plan? How's value going to be created over the long term?
That's really interesting, and it kind of leads into our next point of taking our view of AI from, as Deloitte has said as part of their vision, from being this star, this cure-all technology, into being a real integrated, collaborative team member. Can you explain kind of what that vision means, as a star to the collaborative team member, and how that happens?
Yeah. So what it means is this. Think about it in again, a simple context, because I think examples are always helpful. AI has the capacity to not give you the list of the ingredients that you need to have. It instead can analyze what that list actually requires and provide you with an answer. The beauty is the human embedded in the process, right, on that loop, then applies the judgment. So we're just coming out of the holidays. I'm going to give you a super simple example, which is to say I needed a solar Christmas tree. And I went to, let's call it my favorite platform, and said, I'm looking for a solar Christmas tree over 6 feet tall. Instead of giving me a list of all the solar Christmas trees on that site that were available, what it said to me is, here's the best solar Christmas tree as a function of, you know, all of its variabilities and its features and its price point. And at that intersection, this is the tree. But what it couldn't decide was, is this the right moment to buy the tree? That's the judgment of the human. So the synthesis of all the material about all the solar Christmas trees out there came to me already integrated and allowed me to then make the decision from that point, instead of having to go through all the detail to arrive at that synthesis myself. So the beauty of where we are in the AI journey is, and why it becomes a team member, not a star, is the team member brings you the synthesized information with maybe the best suggestion for what you do next. And depending on your level of risk comfort, it may actually execute the decision. But if you're not comfortable with that degree of risk, then what happens is the human exercises the judgment of the decision. Do I buy it now? So now let me take that simple example and talk to you through an enterprise lens. Think about the average supply chain. All the buying decisions that have to be made in order to produce a product. AI has the capacity to synthesize all of that information so that you understand what the best option is for buying the underlying components you need to build that product. But your CFO is still going to matter because do we do it now? Which quarter do we do it in? What does that mean for our cash flow? Those are judgment calls that are about how you run the business. So that's why it's a team member.
Right.
And a really powerful one because it has the capacity to ingest a level of information that even the smartest humans cannot, but that synthesized version, those smart humans can take and exercise their best judgment.
See, I think that's really interesting too, because you talk about risk and you think, okay, well, how much do I trust the information that AI is giving me? And there's so many talks about different types of AI and the risks involved with it. You're particularly interested, I've read, in trustworthy AI. That's something I haven't heard a lot about. Can you explain that to me?
So, and it's exactly the frame that you said. If you're going to depend on the synthesis to then execute judgment, you have to trust what that synthesis is giving you. That's important because ultimately the goal is to not redo the work. The goal isn't to take what AI has done and redo it in your own frame in order to believe it. So trustworthiness becomes incredibly important. Trustworthiness is a function of a couple of things. One, a level of transparency. Do I understand how this was built? Do I understand what data it utilizes? Second thing is, who was at that table? Because the reality is the development and the application of AI is a function of humans who've built the models, humans who've identified what information and what data you want it to utilize. So the reality is it matters who's at the table because there are decisions that are made all along the way about what's included, what's excluded, how you apply value to what you have chosen to include. All of that becomes, it's the notion of it's the ingredient that makes the cake. Well, here's the reality. You don't undo the cake, you taste the cake in its form, right? In its whole form. So trustworthiness is you have to believe that set of decisions, that you understand what you valued in making those decisions, what you've chosen to include, what you've chosen to exclude. That allows, and the reason this is important is because when you want your workforce to adopt and adapt the job that they have and adopting the AI that you've deployed, you need trustworthiness to really reinforce and help, frankly, move that adoption forward faster.
The buy-in. You need people to be
That's
able to
right.
buy in.
And people, it's human nature. We first tend to dislike what we don't understand because we have no frame for it. So when you bring AI to the workplace and you think about the sheer level of change and transformation of the work, the actual work itself, you need your workforce to have a level of trust in your application of that AI and in the execution of their duties.
Okay, last question, kind of.
All right.
Wrap it up for me. Your biggest takeaway from CES 2026, looking forward to the year, what is it?
AI is going to be quieter in some ways, but much more valued because this evolution, moving from single point solutioning into really thinking about the enterprise, is going to be incredibly important because it's going to drive the value that businesses need in the future in order to continue their own growth trajectory and to meet their own vision. So we're going to lose a little flash, which is actually okay because we're getting the real operationalization and what's required. And that's what we're seeing. If we think about last year, it was sort of tack AI on to all the things, but now what we're seeing is the manifestation of AI embedded in the things. And that's what we're going to continue to see in 26.
Onward and upward. Here's
Absolutely.
to an exciting new year. China, thank you so much for joining me.
Faith, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Fabulous conversation. Once again, China Widener is the U.S. Board of Directors at Deloitte. She's also the Vice Chair of Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Industry at Deloitte. Thanks so much. For more CES content, you can head over to latimes.com or visit our YouTube channel at LA Times Studios.
We'll have more from CES 2026 as the day goes on. For now, let's head back to the show floor for another look at what vendors are showcasing.
It is Republic of Gamers' 20th anniversary, and to celebrate, we have a new design from Kojima Productions in collaboration with ASUS. This is purely aesthetic, though if you are a fan of Kojima or Death Stranding or pretty cool design, I think this would be a huge highlight over here. The specs of the laptop are not that different from the Flow Z13. This is purely an aesthetic choice, though it does look really good, and the case itself does seem to take heavy inspiration from Death Stranding, though you probably don't want to throw it like there. They have swapped the slogan for Ludens Who Dare, which is purely Kojima and based on the head designer from Kojima Productions. There are also peripherals based on existing gaming peripherals such as headphones, mouse, and a mouse pad area. Again, this is purely design, but it's nice design.
That's a snapshot of what's happening on the CES floor, but the conversations behind the tech matter too. Back at the Foundry, we're continuing interviews with the leaders that are shaping what's next. Let's head back inside.
Hi, I'm Kristen Burke, and I am at the Foundry at CES, and I'm speaking with Ganesha Rasaya, who is the SVP and GM of Enterprise AI Platforms at Celestica, and we're going to jump right into these questions. Ganesha, when you look at AI today, what are you seeing as the biggest productivity gains right now for the enterprise?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me here. When I think about the most obvious gains, we see it in the area of coding. And I think it's interesting because on the one hand, it's pretty obvious where coding companies and the valuations are. You look at the startups out there that are getting to $100 million of ARR really quickly. It's very obvious most of them are focused on the coding space very specifically. But the more interesting question is why? And I think what's happening is that as you think about the coding archetype, it's a developer. And the developer generally is an individual who is very tech savvy, who is working in code, and an assistant or an agent helping you code is a very natural extension. It's almost like another human working with you, but working alongside you. And I think that's where we see it. We see a lot of value in coding acceleration. And the developer archetype has been gaining, I would say, pretty significantly.
And how do you see AI technology evolving over time, then, based on some of the work that you're doing at Celestica currently?
You know, Kristen, I have an interesting view, or maybe a different view on this, which is that I think generative AI is going to, over time, become somewhat ubiquitous. And by that I mean, in our day-to-day lives, as AI investments and capital investments continue to happen at the infrastructure layer, which is also where we play very significantly, it's going to become very ubiquitous. You don't really think about, oh, I'm doing this and there's AI built into it, and I'm doing that and there's AI not built into it. It's going to become so prevalent. I'll give you an example. Today, and somehow this is a lot of embellishment, even my new washing machine has the word AI mode on it. It's a little excessive.
Too much, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
it's happening so fast.
Exactly.
Overnight.
That's right. And so, but I do think it's going to become so ubiquitous that we're really not thinking about what's in AI versus not. The other example I'd give you is just a few years ago, I was driving on a family trip, and we were listening to the radio by chance, and one of my kids says, "Dad, can we fast forward to the next song? And the mindset is the children of today are tuned to a non-linear video audio stream, meaning I can switch around, I can move to the next one, so on and so forth. The notion of radio being a broadcast and you're just going to have to listen through it, that's just very different. And so the world is going to get, especially the children of this generation are going to be trained in a model where the expectation is going to be AI. They're not thinking about what is and isn't in AI. It's just a thing. It's just part of the fabric of life. So that's how I see that manifesting over time in our day-to-day lives.
And all of that sounds really exciting. And not to get pessimistic or anything, but I am curious, what do you think are some of the biggest roadblocks and bottlenecks right now that are holding companies back at the enterprise level from either implementing this technology or progressing it forward? And I'm curious if you're experiencing any of those growing pains at Celestica and how you're dealing with them.
Yeah, I mean, at Celestica, we play a very significant role, particularly in the enterprise, around AI infrastructure. So compute storage networking is the space in which we operate. We're building products in that space. There's a lot of capital investment going into that space across hyperscalers and enterprise. But the reality is the great unlock comes from productivity gains and from inferencing. So the typical argument you hear is that, well, we need to pilot, we need to test, it's a people issue, the change management aspect of it is challenging. I agree with, in general, that statement. However, I think what is also true, and perhaps even more true than otherwise, is that in the enterprise world today, each of the providers of technology, whether particularly at the software layer, they have their own data domain. My data within my SaaS application is different than your data in your SaaS application. The challenge or the opportunity with AI is to be able to inference across all of that. Why in the world would I give somebody else the right to that and you give somebody else the right to that so that they then can capture value that otherwise I have historically done to the end customer? So the competitive dynamic in the industry is really interesting, and it's so there's a lot of jostling for power because everybody needs, to know who will be the interface to the customer, and ideally the single interface. But there's this jostling for power, like who controls the customer, because that's where the value is.
Right.
And so I think the ecosystem is going to go through its gyrations, and there's a lot of interconnectivity protocols that are built for agent interaction. But I'm sure every one of these software providers are going to want to own the customer as they should. I think that is as big a deterrent or a challenge today than anything else. Said differently, if we had one operating system provider and only one application provider and only one hardware player, and we had a myriad of customers, I think we'd be inferencing today at scale much more quickly because it's only my data off of which you're inferencing versus my competition. I think that dynamic has to play out alongside customer choice. That's ultimately going to drive the interaction of at what point does a given application carry my attention versus another, and I think that's to me is the biggest challenge in enterprise more than anything else.
So do you welcome a little bit of healthy competition in this scenario then?
I do.
You think it's healthy for the industry?
I do. I mean, look, we're a company that we operate in an open architecture. That's something that's very important to us, and I'm a big believer in neutral positions in technology. Why? Because they serve the end customer the best. So let the best player win for the specific use case at the specific time. That to me is what's most interesting. So absolutely welcome the competition. There's so much more to unlock than us gonna, arm wrestling away on the little stuff that we have in front of us.
So hearkening back to some earlier conversations that you and I have had, there is obviously a lot of kind of fear and paralysis surrounding the AI conversation right now, both at the enterprise level and at the consumer level. And I think just from an organizational standpoint, I'm curious how you're handling that from a communication standpoint and also just individually, right? What are your thoughts on this? Is that warranted, and how do you deal with it from a workplace standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, at Celestica in particular, we're bullish on AI. We obviously are building for it, but we're also driving adoption within the company. Coding is a big example. Our legal team does a lot of AI-related work with agents in place. And, I look at it, and we candidly look at it as there's an opportunity to unlock productivity, and the fear of, which is the typical theme that you hear, the fear of job displacement. In the interim period, I see it as job transitions and role transitions, right? The example I like to use is, at the end of the day, the human being remains the unit of consumption. And so long as we are building for other humans, it's interesting. The two analogies I'd use is, when people talk about AGI and what a human's going to do, well, imagine a world in which you're sort of queen or king of a kingdom, or but one that is populated by robots. Is that interesting, or is the alternative that we're more?
It's interesting.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But but you don't relate to that. The other example is, I'm a big NBA fan, big Lakers fan. So my son and I, in particular, spend a lot of time on that. But the point is, imagine a world in which we'd be watching a bunch of robots playing an NBA game. Like, we can't relate to that. Yeah, exactly. And the reason is we cannot relate to a bare metal device jumping around and doing unnatural things that I can't relate to. If it can jump 10 feet, I can't jump 10 feet. I don't relate to a helicopter flying because they're like, oh, it's great, it's a helicopter. But I'm not trying to be a helicopter. But in sports, as an example, that human connection is really important. So I think it's, so long as we remain centralized and focused on human improvement, which is ultimately the source of funding and investment and consumption, I think we'll be all right over time.
Yeah. And how are you going about identifying those human-in-the-loop inflection points? I think that's so important and such a critical part of this conversation, and I'm curious how you actually analyze that.
Yeah, I think it's, and I personally have done a lot of this myself, is that you sort of take for granted, especially in the enterprise, you take for granted this notion of digital friction. And the reality is, in the world in which an employee, a knowledge worker operates today, there's so many things that you take for granted, as far as, oh yeah, this is going to take me a few more seconds. I'm used to that. My browser is refreshing. I'm used to that. The greatest currency of productivity is time. And we are losing time if you add it all up. That's a little crazy. Why in the world do I have to refresh my browser? Why can't it refresh itself? Why do I need to even think about that? Why can my agent do half the things that I do? So it's about rethinking how we do work. So I'll give you an example. In my team, we're obviously growing very fast, and it's a great story. But I'm pushing my team to say, I'm going to constrain you in terms of the headcount that you're looking to hire. Not because we can't afford it, but because I want us to be able to incorporate AI and agents into what we do. And in doing so, the unlock will be far greater than the spend that you would make on hiring more people. And I want the people that we hire to do the even greater, higher value work. So you still get to hire, but guess what? You're going to have a whole lot more productivity. There's no chance you're going to be able to pull that off with just hiring humans. You got to do more than just that with humans in the loop with AI.
Yeah. And then, is there something to be said for when you implement these AI technologies, the people that you have currently employed or potentially employ in the future, it unlocks the ability for them to explore other skill sets, right? Which is really exciting from a human potential, I feel like.
It's true, because there's so much that I learn from AI on a day-to-day basis, and as soon as I need it, I look it up, or I use an agent to help me with some of the work that I'm doing. I am growing as a human because of it. And there's skills and capabilities that I get to learn as I do my job at a pace far greater than I've ever been able to do. Right. It's not just a browser search, an internet search generically. Now it's telling me, it's doing stuff for me, and it's teaching me. That's a whole other dynamic.
Right.
So I get superpowers now.
So this is a little bit more reductive, I realize, but it's another conversation we've had previously. Can you talk a little bit about the differences as you see it between being human and being a humanoid? and how that parlays into this conversation of the hypothetical context of why AI probably will not replace humans entirely in the workplace, because there is this fundamental difference between those two things.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a definitional thing about what does it mean to be human, and I think that it's an interesting question to ask. And I did candidly, following our prior discussion, think a lot about this topic, and I'll share a few thoughts. Some of this borders on philosophy and spirituality, but I'll share it for. Yeah, it's an interesting world in which we operate. AI, in my mind, is so profound because it is the closest approximation to human interaction that we've had with technology in a long time. If not for the fact that we're looking at a screen and prompting things, this thing seems to be interacting with us. Could have been another human on the other side. You wouldn't really know, and that makes it like, it's aware of context. That's a big deal. But I think if you get back to the humanoid piece of this, today, as humans, with the advances of medical technology, many people carry bare metal capabilities inside their bodies, pacemakers, knee replacement, so on and so forth. These are foreign objects that are now intermingled into organic matter, and that's, at least in a physical sense,
right,
you can call it a cyborg, but you can call it something. The question becomes, well, is that a robot or is that a human? Because you have a certain mix, so to speak, right? The alternative is that what happens if you put organic matter into a bare metal robot,
sure,
and like, which of these two are humans, and how do you make the case for one versus another?
Right, absolutely.
And so it's a really...
I mean, the same thing is happening, just conversely.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So to me, the question becomes, if we think about the big discussion around replacing humans and the notion of AGI, which, I'm a fan of what Jan LeCun talks about, and how that's not in the near-term horizon something to really consider. I totally agree with that view. I look at it in the theoretical limits of physics. So let's think about it as, in the theoretical limit, AI would have the combined intelligence of the entire human population. Theoretically, that should be a theoretical limit, and on top of that, reinforcement learning happens. Imagine if the single intellectual capacity of all humans were combined into one entity, and it then grows at that pace. That's pretty powerful. So let's say that's even possible. I think there's an interesting boundary, because as humans, there are things that we know and that we engineer for, which represents our collective intelligence. And then I think there are things that make us human that we do not understand, that we do not know how to engineer for. Just to take an example, a lot of us think about what we do here before we die. But what happens after we die? Well, each of us has a different view of what happens after we die. Do we know how to engineer for what happens after we die? We don't, but yet it informs our actions today.
Right.
So how would we...
In such a big way.
In such a big way.
Right.
So the question becomes, how would you engineer that? And what path will the collectively accumulated intelligence of a single entity carry, and how would that over time learn and prophesize and hypothesize about what happens after death? That is an entirely different path than what each of us individually, a path that we would take. So I think so much of what I'm saying is, so much of what makes us human is about what we don't understand. And so if what we don't understand is so much of that, how in the world would we share that with an AI to incorporate? Because we don't understand it.
Right.
So you can't build what you don't understand. You just kind of know it's there, and it affects our lives.
You certainly can't program what you don't understand.
Exactly. We could take otherwise irrational steps and actions that we take based on this construct that what happens. I'm just using an example of what happens after death. Even in real everyday life, this happens. Like we talked about a meditating robot. How annoying would it be to have a robot meditate? It's like, get off your
I do
behind
think
and work.
Just from a duration standpoint, they would be very good at it. Certainly beat me, every single time.
It's true.
But
That's true.
what would they actually be thinking about? What would they be feeling?
Right.
How would that be impacting the spiritual component, which is
Right.
what we're all striving for when we meditate,
That's right.
ostensibly. So,
That's right. Yeah.
when you think about things like the Turing test, though, how do you feel about that? Is it mimicry, in your opinion, when you reach this point of a robot at least duping people into believing that they can exert, the same level of emotional intelligence as humans? Or is there something there, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we get into now the finiteness of technology today. And I think we're in in a space where if we leave aside AGI and ASI for a minute, I think it's really interesting to see how large language models have been developed, and the notion of it being an intelligent recorder and an intelligent regurgitator, very intelligent, by the way, because it does represent a lot of training into the actions. But I think that's the test that I think it's time will tell, I guess. Yeah, it's this continuum, I don't.
That's fair.
And the challenge with that continuum is that limit continues to move, even for us. So it's a bit of a race of sorts.
All right, my last question for you. What are you most excited about in the AI landscape? It could be at the enterprise level at your company, anything you're working on, or just consumer-based, broad-based.
I'm particularly interested in what AI does for humanity. I think there's a notion of, basic necessity and basic capability that AI brings as it democratizes skill sets, knowledge, information, and so on and so forth. So to the extent that, AI is permeating so many different industries, so that every child, every human has their basic needs fulfilled, that's special to me. And then, there will still be a relative sort of stratification of society and all of that good stuff. But technologies like these tend to be so foundational, and they tend to be very deflationary, which means they're very accessible over time. And I think that opportunity is just beautiful because it raises the bar and raises the floor for everyone. Less interested in what happens at the top end. It's interesting because it steers us forward, but equally, if not more interesting, in what it does for everybody in just about every part of the world, and that's special.
That is really special.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Ganesha, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you coming in. Ganesha Rasaya is the SVP and GM of Enterprise AI Platforms at Celestica, and this is Kristen Burke from LA Times Studios at CES, the Foundry.
Our CES show continues in just a moment with more interviews, show floor highlights, and key moments from across the event. Stay with us to see more.
Welcome to CES 2026 in Las Vegas. I'm here at the Foundry, and I'm joined today by very special guest, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. Dr. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you are the person behind all of this, where we are sitting today. You are the founder of Networks and the owner of the LA Times. Now, the last time you were at CES, I understand, was quite a few years ago. Tell me a little bit about that, and then what brings you back today?
Well, crazy as it may sound, the last time I was at CES is literally a decade ago. And we came there then to announce and release AI machine vision technology, in which we could take the phone and actually image anything in the world and allow even the blind to see. The problem is it was 10 years ahead of its time. I literally then brought it to the LA Times then and said, you can take every image and convert that image in real time into a video. And the feedback was, who's going to be crazy enough to look through the camera of the iPhone? So if you want to go look at the website, it's still alive. We kept it alive, called nantmobile.com. You will see all these videos there that will recognize images, videos, QR codes, and money even, allow the blind to see. So in frustration, we went stealth, and it's been a decade of stealth in which Nantworks, we have spent close to $3 to $4 billion quietly across a multitude of companies, all stealth as part of Nantworks.
Well, break down Nantworks for me. What is Nantworks? And it's my impression that there are a lot of parts of that family. So can you explain that?
So, look, I'm a physician, surgeon, scientist, but I ran the California Nanosystems Institute at UCLA for 10 years, which integrated technology, networks, software, computing, and healthcare. So I believe that the biology of the human being, of synapses, interconnectivity, messaging, AI, cancer, is all connected. So I've used my knowledge of the biology of the human being and transferred that into digital technology that's happening in real time, including AI. I presented as early as 2010 to President Obama when he was president that AI would be the future of healthcare. And I have a little thing called the rocket ship. I realized being ahead of time is really not the answer. So let's go build the companies, execute on that vision, show real world technology quietly, stealthily. And this CES is where I'm going to be revealing the platform of Nantworks.
Can you say a little bit more about that now that you're here with me today, now that you finally made it after nearly a decade?
Right. Well, since I couldn't convince the LA Times, I think it was 2012, to go into the future, I bought it.
And here we are today.
So I bought it really to move it from what we call ink to digital. And as you could see today is the Los Angeles Times Media Group, where we have not only the voice, but we have the integrity of news, but more importantly, we have an opportunity to really inspire, teach, educate, and engage. And that's what LATMG is. So we can talk about Nantworks on the side of how would we engage with people. Then they talk about Nantworks in terms of how we would cure life-threatening diseases, whether it be cancer, diabetes, HIV, and in fact how we address aging. And we can talk about Nantworks about how we need to save this planet, what we need to do for energy. And then we need to talk about Nantworks about, imagine we could move data at the speed of light. So that is Nantworks. Nantworks is an organization that's really taking the futuristic of technology, which wasn't the future, it was here 10 years ago. We were part of the NASA, I was a NASA scientist. The machine vision was founded by the scientists who developed Roomba, and the development for the machine on Mars. I ran the National Lambda Rail, which actually interconnected all the data centers for the Large Hadron Collider. So these are the things that I said, look, rather than being noisy about it, just develop each of them individual companies, bring them together under one umbrella called Nantworks, and let the world understand when it's ready. And 2026, it is ready, and here I am.
It's ready, and we have a fresh new announcement. This is fresh off the press, from my understanding, NantX. Can you break down NantX for me? I know you just covered a lot. We're talking about data at the speed of light. Let's zoom in, NantX.
So NantX will be really part of the LATMG platform. We have now made a partnership with New York Stock Exchange floor, where we will be as part of LATMG on the floor of New York Stock Exchange. And as I was walking through the New York Stock Exchange and ICE, and as you see, ICE, which is the parent of New York Stock Exchange, has now taken Polymarket. And this is the future. And I realized that the ability for a normal person in the public to want to own, let's say, a very expensive Berkshire Hathaway stock or an Apple stock. They should be able to participate and actually own a piece of that stock if that's all they can own. That's called tokenization. And if you can tokenize a stock but make it very, very safe and secure and all under the regulatory framework of SEC and FINRA and use blockchain. So what happened is we were one of the first blockchain patents to have been developed. And I was approached by Mark Ellermitz and the team, and today you see the press release of Nant Global Finance, and the platform that's going to be coming is called NantX, which will allow anybody to own a piece of stock or trade on a global security exchange and have it really efficient and safe.
How does this stay true to your mission of connecting and empowering people?
Because we have to empower everybody. Whether you're an African in the bush trying to make a living, or whether you're the billionaire trying to make stock exchange, or whether you want to be able to, what I call democratize with a small d, the ability for everybody to share in this community. And the stock market security exchange, even asset exchange, is a very difficult thing to do unless you have real-time ability to know how to do that with a mobile app. So this is what this is. So NantX will be that platform that in real time you can not only see your stock, immediately exchange it, immediately buy it, immediately own it, and be secure through blockchain.
Well, if NantX wasn't already a big enough announcement, I hear that you have another announcement that goes back again to your very storied resume of healthcare. Now, tell me about all of the new and exciting things that you're developing with cancer that have to do with tech and AI and ties into where we are today, CES 2026.
So the world knows me in healthcare all the way from the time I developed American Pharmaceutical Partners, in which we had 150 FDA-approved products, and heparin caused, sadly, 86 deaths in the United States. We were the only safe supply of heparin, which meant that the idea of having raw materials in the control of America as a national security would be a really key element. I then developed Abraxane, which is this drug for cancer, and sold it to Celgene. I decided then, as part of this whole stealth movement, to say the future of healthcare, future of cancer, future of diabetes, future of autoimmune disease is actually in your body. So let me explain that.
Please.
You and I sitting here in our body have 3 cells, I mean much more than that, but let's just talk about 3 cells.
Okay.
One called the natural killer cell, one called the killer T cell, and one called the T regulatory cell. What does that mean? Well, your natural killer cell has evolved for 450 million years to allow you to be protected from cancer, HIV, COVID, and even aging. Now, me saying that is like me presenting in 2008 that machine vision.
Right, because I'm like, I don't look 450 million years old. Explain that.
Well, thank God.
I'm hoping you're not saying that.
But this cell got evolved from a time, literally from the ocean, for mammals to exist. And it evolved from 450 million years so that a cell from my body can be given to you without any reaction. The cell from anybody's, so it's really been evolved so that it can be allowed to be cross-reacted. So I realized that this natural killer cell for cancer, for example, just like you go to the Red Cross to get red blood cells for a blood transfusion, we could have natural killer cells as the Red Cross of cancer. Well, how do you... How?
How is the question.
So, if I then took a donation of blood from you, like you give blood, and extracted white cells, and deconstructed those white cells into these 3 components that I'm just talking about, and grew them into billions of cells, froze them down, that became the American Red Cross of cancer.
So I ask you again, how? Is there a machine? Is this, what is the technology that allows you to do that?
So let's talk about the why and then we'll talk about the how.
Let's do it.
The why is, if I were able to activate your natural killer cells or give you natural killer cells, that could actually treat cancer regardless of the tumor type. Whether you have lung cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, triple negative breast cancer, leukemia, that natural killer cell would treat that. Whether you have COVID, long COVID, those are the trials that we're doing. The future is whether it's actually going to help you live longer because of longevity, of the signs of aging. That's the why. We have now gotten approved for one of the whys for bladder cancer, and we're going to make a big announcement soon at the JP Morgan conference about the evolution of that. And the how. Well, the how is we have to, again, democratize the ability for everybody to be able to get these natural killer cells and CAR T cells. So today we have CAR T cells made by Novartis and Bristol Myers, etc., and it costs $1 million, $400,000 for a single transplant. And that is great if you can afford it. Imagine if you could reduce that to $75,000 to $50,000 and make it available for the world. Well, the only way you can do that is starting AI, robotics, automation. And what we'll be announcing soon, in next week, is the world's first robotic automated manufacturing machine that could take that blood and the end on the other side have either CAR T cell or natural killer cell.
Is that what we can expect from the conference next week?
So I'm announcing today, yes, on the 14th of January, as part of the JP Morgan conference, we will be hosting the very highest level of from Saudi, Her Royal Highness Haya Al Saud and His Excellency Bandar Al Kanawi, who will participate in the inaugural USA-Saudi Biotech Alliance. This will allow then, not only from a US perspective, from the Saudi perspective, to have an availability of this technology, not only for the Middle East, but all of Africa. So we've now created the globalization where healthcare should be the foreign policy of the United States to not only share, but expand technology around the world as part of foreign policy.
That is fascinating and so very, very exciting. If you can touch quickly on why it's so important that healthcare communities continue to use technology in order to scale things like you were just talking about, to reach more people, to create a more connected, accessible, healthy world, which is very true to your personal mission.
So if you listen to this midterms, and you watch the subject is, oh my God, Obamacare and the cost of premiums is going through the roof this month, and that's the issue between the Republicans and Democrats. Actually, it's neither.
Explain that.
Right.
Break that down.
I explained this to President Obama, and nobody got that then. That we keep on mixing up the concept of healthcare and health insurance. Health insurance is not health care. So we talk about premiums, but you don't talk about availability and access to care. But it turns out that 10% of the US population represents 80% of our costs. And what do you mean by that? Cancer, diabetes, NICU. So if we could take these 20% even of life-threatening chronic expensive diseases and create a tool, now we're back to with AI and mobile platform, that I could tell in real time how to manage that patient. For example, imagine we have a high-risk lady who's pregnant with a baby, and I'm sitting in my car on my way to work, and the mother gets an oxytocin shot. Imagine if I, on my phone, could immediately see the mother's contraction, the baby's heart rate, the mother's EKG, and in real time, and how that oxytocin is interacting with the other medication in real time, and be able to give an instruction in real time and then measure that outcome. That tool is now available. We will be releasing not only that tool, it's now in the hands of 10,000 doctors. It's now in the hands of 600 hospitals. That's what I meant about let me go quietly away with NantWorks, and that company is called NantIQ, which is now the first FDA-approved AI EKG on the phone that can predict cardiac decompensation 24 hours before it happens.
Wow, 24 hours before it happens.
And it's already saved lives. That is the change that we can make and reduce the cost using today's budget, getting better outcomes by managing, truly managing outcomes and paying for outcomes. Think about that, paying for outcomes.
And the path forward to that, through that, to scaling that is AI.
The path forward to that is to give the doctors the tools, the nurses the tools in real time, using AI and technology to make decisions that affect outcomes. Lower cost, better outcomes, and pay for outcomes, and don't pay for fee for service.
Well, surely this is not the end, I'm sure, of more exciting announcements, and it sounds like there's a lot to expect next week in San Francisco. Very much looking forward to it. To wrap up our conversation and end on the point of CES, there's been so many promises last year made about the future of tech and AI. What's one thing that excites you this year, heading into 2026, about where we are moving in terms of something like AI?
So, the reason I'm back at the CES is we're going to launch not only the robotics, which we're going to launch at the JP Morgan, but we're going to launch a humanoid. And a humanoid that has cognition. And the humanoid, the first humanoid that's going into the home and helping a patient with Parkinson's disease. And the humanoid that will take this blood we're talking about, put it into the robot, and on the other side comes our cells. The world of cognition and reasoning. So I have one of the first patents called the reasoning engine.
Reasoning engine. Interesting.
Whereby the whole concept of AI now is called inference, meaning you take a hypothesis, you take data, and you make a decision, and by what you call, you inferred that or inference, and then you take an action. That's how your brain works as part of synapses. But what is that synapse? Well, that synapse moves data at terabytes a second, which is at the speed of light. So what's the future? Is to build a chip that moves at the speed of light. And I will soon announce we will have the first US Foundry that is building a optic chip that will actually interact with electronics, called optoelectronics, and move data at the speed of light. And that chip has already been in space for the last 3 years.
You're kidding.
Yes.
This is a lot of exciting announcements.
So to close, what is NantWorks? This is NantWorks.
This is NantWorks. All of this under one umbrella in one home.
Correct.
All from your mind.
Well, to be very fair, from the minds of some of the smartest scientists and people, that we've given them a home to not only believe, to innovate, to inspire, and give them the freedom to do that, and direct them into that avenue. And what you see now is truly, over the course of 2026, each of these entities being revealed. And we don't talk about the planet and global warming, but we've now harvested millions of tons from the ocean of calcium carbonate, and now making bioplastics that is actually replacing plastics, and it's already on the market for plates and straws. That's non-biorenewables. So I think what we will have left this planet with is at least contributing something that will make it better for the rest of us. And I'm just happy to actually announce it with you today. at LATMG.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for making these announcements. Thank you for your work. Once again, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, the founder of MantWorks and the owner of LA Times. Now, thank you so much for joining me. For more CES content, you can head over to latimes.com or head over to our YouTube at LA Times Studios.
We'll be back with more CES interviews, show floor highlights, and keynotes from the biggest tech event of the year. I'm your host, Angelica Coronado, signing off.